In the last week or so, Japanese motorcycle magazine Young Machine have been circulating rumours that Kawasaki are working on a mid-capacity version of their retro Z900 RS based upon the Z650 platform. Young Machine have a habit of getting these things right, so in today's video, we'll look at some of the speculation from across the web, as well as which bikes the rumoured Z650 RS would have to go up against. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news and rumours right here on YouTube, then please do remember to hit subscribe. So let's take a look at the renderings that Young Machine posted, which started this whole thing off. It essentially looks like a pretty quick Photoshop job, which takes the top half and front mudguard of the Z900 RS and plonks it onto the bottom half of the current Z650. There are no additional details on the engine, no retro looking exhaust, it's just a quick cut and shut. But to be fair to Young Machine, they could well be onto something. After all, Yamaha did a similar job on their MT-07, turning it into the XSR 700 with minimal effort. Essentially, it gives them another bike on the market with very little in the way of R&D costs, and naked bikes in this 650 area sell well, especially if they have a bit of character, so why wouldn't Kawasaki follow suit? They've already done something pretty similar with their Z900, turning it into the Z900 RS. It's largely the same chassis, it's the same 948cc inline 4, albeit tuned down for a bit more mid-range, the same suspension and similar if slightly improved brakes. The only major changes are stylistic in order to mimic the looks of the iconic Kawasaki Z1 introduced way back in 1972. There's a more rounded tank, a retro headlight, the TFT dash makes way for more traditional clocks, and it uses a revised longer subframe and seat with a little flick to the tail section to give it that proper old school Japanese muscle bike look. The Z650 is the smaller sibling of the Z900 upon which the RS is based, and it's ripe for the same treatment. I personally owned a Kawasaki ER6N back when I started this channel, which is the precursor to the current Z650 with pretty much the same specs and engine, and I loved it. There was enough power for a bit of fun, and the handling was good enough, but it was also practical and an economically sensible bike to both buy and run. The only thing that eventually convinced me to chop it in and buy the Street Twin was the looks. Back when the ER6M was introduced, Kawasaki's designs were at the more modern end of the spectrum, and that's even more so the case now with fragmented angular designs that really push the boundaries of modern production bikes. Some people like that, and that's all good, but others like myself, not so much. So the same sub 7 gram bike with close to 70 horsepower and decent handling, but in the Z900 RS form factor would tick a lot of boxes. Simply add the retro headlight, tank and tail section, do away with the TFT dash in favour of some analog clocks, and offer it up in some sweet paint jobs. The only problem for Kawasaki is that this part of the market is already pretty busy, and there are more bikes coming in 2021. For a start, we've already mentioned the Yamaha XSR 700, which is based upon the super successful MT-07. This would probably be the most similar bike to the Z650 RS should it come to the market, as it also uses a parallel twin-cylinder engine configuration. That said, the Z650 has a 180-degree crank, which results in a sound like this. Whereas the MT and XSR use a cross-plane crank to give it more of a sweet sound. You could argue that 270-degree crank gives it a little more character, and the XSR also has more power at around 75 horsepower to the Z650's 67. So Kawasaki will have to work hard on the looks to compete and try to come in under the $7.5 grand price point. It's also worth considering the Suzuki SV650, which they adapted into a cafe racer styled bike in the SV650X. This variant comes with different paint, a cafe style fairing fairing and a tuck and roll seat. At £6,599 on the road, it's a bit of a bargain compared to the Yamaha, especially considering it puts out similar power figures. But it's the genuine V-twin engine configuration that could prove most tempting to potential buyers. It's the only V-twin at this capacity and price point, and as a result has a lovely sound. Essentially, this is what Yamaha were trying to mimic along with other manufacturers when they put the cross-plane crank into their parallel twins. The SV is a little long in the tooth though, and doesn't quite have the visual finesse of the XSR. Honda's CB650R would also be a crucial competitor for the Z650RS if it does indeed come to the market in 2021. It's the most powerful bike in the segment at the moment, and by a decent margin, capable of 94 horsepower owing to its high-revving inline-4 engine. It makes for a zippy machine that will fly if you can keep the revs up, but perhaps lacks the versatility that the low-down torque of the twins offer. It can feel a touch gutless at town speeds where you simply can't keep the revs in that peak power band, but at £7,199 on the road at the time I wrote this video, it's hard to ignore those extra 20 horses. On top of the Japanese bikes, Triumph are also set to enter the 650 naked segment next year in the form of their rebooted Trident. We've only seen the concept so far, but I was lucky enough to see it in the flesh at the London Design Museum a few weeks ago. And from that initial all-white model, you can still see that it will work the retro angle a little in the shape of the tank, the clock and the headlight. But what's more exciting about this bike is that it could well challenge the CB for power using a triple-cylinder engine that must be in some part derived from the previous generation Street 650. That bike was good for over 100 horsepower, but personally I think the Trident's success will come down to whether it can get anywhere near that £7,000 price point that the Japanese bikes are hovering around. So a potential Z650RS probably wouldn't have the most characterful or powerful engine, and it might not be the best spec'd, but their Z900RS was so warmly received from a visual perspective that if they could deliver something similar but in a smaller, lighter and more affordable package, then I see no reason why it wouldn't still make for an awesome little bike. But what do you reckon? Does the Z650 platform have what it takes, or does that 180-degree parallel twin lacking a bit of je ne sais quoi? Let me know which bike you'd pick in the comments below, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.